I used to think omission was accidental, like a name skipped in a rush or a message lost in a filter. The subject line read, Family Investment Review, Mandatory Attendance. I saw it not because it was meant for me, but because Logan forwarded it to the old thread we hadn't used in years. The Rhodes Legacy Circle still intact, still operating. Just without me. 17 names. I counted them twice. Mine wasn't there. I reopened my email app. Nothing. No oversight. No delay. Just the confirmation that the meeting would take place at Uncle Charles's house, the same one where Grandpa once strung lights across the porch and made us sit through grace, whether we believed or not. I called the number still saved under Mother. Cassidy. Maybe it's best you don't come. No breath between words. This isn't really your place anymore. There was no tone, only decision. The kind that doesn't wobble when spoken aloud. I didn't ask why. I didn't say anything at all. I just stared at my calendar and the blank square where the meeting would have gone. Then I opened the old green ledger Grandpa used to track repairs and tucked the date inside. No notes, no explanation, just the number 14 circled once in pencil. I remembered the smell of his tools, the oil-stained cloth he always kept folded in his back pocket. Nothing works forever, he used to mutter. But everything deserves a second look. I held the cloth in my hand that morning, now frayed and nearly translucent. I didn't clean with it. I didn't throw it out. I folded it again exactly the way he did. There was once a time when my chair was pulled out for me not as a courtesy, but because someone believed I belonged. That chair no longer exists. At family dinners, I learned to eat slowly, so I'd have an excuse to stay quiet. At family meetings, I spoke last, if at all, and never more than needed. When I won a state competition, the only response I remember was Logan's, "School is ranked higher." I closed the notebook. Didn't archive the message. Didn't delete it either. Some silences don't need to be explained. They just need to be remembered. I used to think if I just stayed polite long enough, someone would remember to turn around. Every December, I mailed a Christmas card with clean handwriting and a quiet signature, just C. I chose neutral designs, pine trees, snowflakes, nothing too sentimental. I addressed each one carefully, never skipping a name. They never came back. They also never came. For my mother's birthday last year, I sent a bouquet of white orchids. I checked the delivery confirmation twice, though I knew she'd never say whether it arrived. The florist emailed me a photo. The card looked small beside the blooms. I recognized my own words. Wishing you peace. I attended Logan's wedding without being on the printed guest list. My name was written in pen squeezed into the bottom corner of a seating chart taped beside the catering table. My chair faced the back wall. When I stood to greet him, he glanced at my dress and said, "Didn't know you'd come. Most people in your situation wouldn't." I listened as he described his new condo downtown and the investment property he hadn't even seen in person. I nodded at the right pauses. I folded the napkin on my lap until the corners lined up. When Uncle Charles mentioned the house's Wi-Fi going out every time the microwave ran, I offered to take a look. His reply came like a handshake that never happened. "It's okay. We've got a guy now. No one ever told me not to show up. They just made sure I knew I wasn't expected." I tried to stay useful. I helped wash dishes after dinner without being asked. I brought my own creamer so I wouldn't use theirs. Once I brought extra folding chairs to a family barbecue and overheard my cousin whisper, "She always brings things no one needs." I kept trying anyway. Not out of desperation, but because I thought effort counted. That if I stood still long enough, someone might notice I hadn't left. Tonight, I opened the small wooden box I keep in the back of my closet. Inside were the birthday cards I'd sent over the years, duplicates I'd made in case one got lost. The envelopes were still sealed, addressed, and never returned. I didn't cry. I didn't tear them up. I just closed the box with both hands and didn't look for a place to put it back. I learned early that being present wasn't the same as being counted. The night they raised their glasses for Logan's academic award, I was there. My acceptance letter had arrived that morning, full scholarship program in applied design. I held it folded in my coat pocket all through dinner. I didn't take it out. I waited through the toasts, through the applause, when Uncle Charles tapped his glass again and said, "Now that's how you carry a legacy." I looked down at the corner of my napkin and straightened the seam. At Grandpa's funeral, I stood with my notes in hand, neatly typed 3 minutes, max. Before the service, my mother stepped into the hallway with her lipstick half finished. Better to keep it short. Or maybe don't speak. You tend to get emotional. She didn't look at me when she said it, just adjusted her scarf in the hallway mirror and walked back in. The program listed names of speakers. Mine wasn't there. That winter, a card arrived from Charles's family. Glossy photo, front gold embossed lettering, "To all the Greens who matter." I flipped it over. No handwritten message, just their signatures stacked like a board of directors. I placed it under a stack of old manuals, pressed it between wait and forgetting. There was a photo on my mother's mantel, family grouped in their Sunday best, taken after the burial. I stood off to the side, 1 foot in the frame. Later, the photo was cropped for a smaller frame. My foot didn't make the cut. I never mentioned it. In her hallway, I once overheard her pointing to the frame while speaking to a neighbor. That's from the year we pulled together. Just the core family. No one corrected her. No one looked for me in the margin. At some point, I stopped trying to be visible in places that were built to reflect someone else's shape. Tonight, I opened my notebook, the one with the brown linen cover and the ribbon frayed at the edge. I peeled off the old photo I had taped inside the one where I stood 3 inches outside the center. In its place, I glued the earliest sketch of the full sensor Grandpa and I designed together. It had no caption, no color, but this time it didn't need a name to mean it was mine. I used to think handwriting was the last thing that couldn't lie. The teller glanced at the screen, then turned the monitor slightly away. I recognized the hesitation. Not pity procedure. She tapped a few keys, adjusted her tone. "This account was consolidated last year. The full balance now belongs to Diana Rhodes." I didn't speak. I didn't explain that the account was opened when I was 17, that Grandpa had signed the first deposit slip himself, with a trembling but distinct loop in the wool. There was a transfer of authority, she continued. Signed documents. All in order. I asked to view the scanned file. She printed a copy without comment and slid it across the counter. I knew his handwriting better than anyone. He used to rest the side of his palm on the table when writing checks. After the fall, his right shoulder had a slight hitch, which made the tail of his capital G lean in too far. This signature was smooth, symmetrical, untouched. Clean in a way his body hadn't been in years. I didn't protest. I circled the date in the upper corner and folded the page once then again. The teller offered to discard it for me. I said no without raising my voice. In the parking lot, I sat in the car with the engine off. There was a coffee stain on the envelope I'd brought with me from a cup that had tipped over earlier that week. The lid hadn't been secure. I slipped the paper inside and sealed it anyway. The stain looked like a fingerprint pressed in reverse. Later that evening, I typed a short email. "Do you still have the original will?" The reply came quickly. "I do, don't worry." There was nothing legal about what I had done. No motion filed, no dispute raised. I didn't need a courtroom to confirm what I already understood. They hadn't just erased my name. They had done it with such quiet precision that no one even noticed the paper shift. At family dinners, they taught us to wait our turn, to speak clearly, not loudly, to never overstep. And then they rewrote the ledger while I was still waiting to be heard. I placed the envelope in the back of my filing drawer between a warranty I never redeemed and a letter I never sent. Some documents don't demand action. They only require remembering. I used to think leaving required an announcement. I didn't make one. I deleted the shared calendar invites without opening them. I unsubscribed from the family business newsletter. 5 clicks, no password reset. I archived the folder labeled Legacy Trust Drafts and removed my access permissions before anyone could notice. There was no call, no confrontation, no final word. I didn't ask for an explanation, and I didn't offer one. At the old house, I parked down the block and walked up alone. The front porch still had the chipped blue paint Grandpa never got around to fixing. The nameplate beside the door Whitlow was cracked across the middle one corner loose. I unscrewed it with my keys and wrapped it in the sleeve of my jacket. No one saw me come. No one saw me leave. When I got home, I placed the plaque on the top shelf of my bookcase between a broken soldering iron and an empty ceramic mug with a faint line of glaze missing near the lip. Later, I clicked open my SafeStep account and removed myself from the board of technical advisors. There was a section for comments. I left it blank. I didn't check the group thread afterward, though. I knew someone would say, "She probably wasn't contributing much anyway." That voice was familiar. It usually came after a pause and before a shrug. Once at a fundraiser, I heard my mother say Cassidy has her projects, but she's more comfortable behind the scenes. That's what people say when they want you near, but never center. When they want your labor, not your name. I pulled open the small drawer of my nightstand and took out the pocket watch. I hadn't touched it in months. The metal was warm from the afternoon light. I wound it once, then held it near my ear. The ticking wasn't loud, just steady. In the stillness, I folded a letter into thirds and sealed it without hesitation. The return address was blank. The front read, Rhodes Estate Committee. Inside, I had written, I withdraw my name from all current and future beneficiary designations. I waive representation. No follow-up required. There was no signature. Only the initials at the bottom CRW. I didn't include a date. Some exits don't happen on a calendar. They happen when the silence finally feels earned. I used to think quiet meant something was missing. The cabin had no address that showed up on GPS, just a mile marker and a gravel path that veered left past a rusted mailbox. 1 room for living, 1 for sleeping, and a kitchen that hummed louder than necessary when the fridge kicked in. I kept the chair by the window, the one Grandpa used to nap in when the light was soft enough to forgive the weight of the day. The cushions had flattened unevenly like they'd learned the shape of someone who once mattered. I brought the kettle too, the spout-chipped handle slightly loose. I still filled it each morning. It took longer on the old stovetop, but I didn't mind watching it. The silence was wider out here. It didn't echo, it absorbed. The first few nights I left the porch light on. Not for anyone. Just in case. There were no messages, no reminders, no calendar invites or passive notes. No one asked where I was and no one told me when to return. That absence didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like unrolling a sleeve you didn't know had been too tight. I found the earliest SafeStep schematics tucked in the side pocket of my duffel. Smudged pencil lines, margin notes written during lunch breaks we used to take sitting on overturned milk crates. I redrew the circuit by hand. No sponsor logo, no deadline, just the way I remembered it before anyone else added their names. I didn't build anything that week, just thought. The kind of thinking that doesn't need permission. A letter came, return address blank. I didn't open it. I placed it under the kettle, a paperweight, in a place where nothing drifted far. Once in a hallway lined with portraits, my mother looked past me and said, "Cassidy's always been more of a background character." No one disagreed. They just moved on to the next frame. Out here, there were no frames. I carved a small wooden sign and hung it near the porch steps. The words weren't big. They didn't glow. Repairs. No questions, no judgment, no phone number, no explanation. Only a stillness that didn't demand to be earned. And the chair always facing out, never needing to be filled. I used to think that if they came back, it would mean something had changed. The article had my name in the headline, my full name, not an initial, not a footnote. Just 5 words and a byline, Cassidy Whitlow builds quiet legacy in elder tech. The journalist called me deliberate, said the work reflected a kind of care that couldn't be outsourced. I didn't frame the piece. I folded it in half and used it to keep the back leg of the workbench from wobbling. 2 days later, Logan's email arrived. "Hey, Cass, long time. Saw the piece, super impressive. Would love to catch up. No mention of the 7 years between. No reference to the fact that the last time we spoke, he had looked at my boots and said, 'You don't need to dress like you work here to be taken seriously.'" 12 hours passed before the second message came. "Cassidy, we're still family. You don't have to make a point by cutting everyone off. Your father wouldn't have liked this. There was no signature. No, love, Mom. Just the assumption that guilt still worked." I didn't reply. I opened a blank email, typed 1 sentence into the subject line, "Legacy is earned, not inherited," and left the body empty. It was the kind of message that doesn't ask for conversation. The next day, a letter came in a pale envelope with my old name on the front, Cassidy Rhodes. The handwriting was too careful, as if practice could disguise intention. I placed it on the edge of my desk beside the copper paperweight Grandpa gave me after our first prototype, held together through a storm. I didn't open the letter. The paper said more sealed. A colleague forwarded internal board notes from Rhodes Legacy Trust. Near the bottom, propose incorporation of SafeStep under Family Foundation. Leverage Whitlow patent for narrative alignment. I highlighted the sentence and printed it out. Not for evidence, just to feel the weight of the language in my hand. Once years ago, my mother had said during a panel, "Cassidy has always been intuitive, not so much strategic." No one had challenged her. I left the envelope untouched. It sat between a soldering manual and a list of parts I could never afford when we started. Some returns aren't about reconciliation. They're about access. And I no longer build anything that can be taken without a name. I used to think that becoming different required a ceremony, something visible, something witnessed. Now I mark time with the clicking of a switch and the sound of coffee dripping into a chipped mug. The mint I planted beside the porch grows in uneven clusters. I don't trim it. I let it reach over the edge of the pot like it doesn't know it's supposed to stay contained. The workbench in town isn't large, but it holds what it needs to. 5 stools, a whiteboard that tilts slightly to the right, a small stack of soldering kits, some missing pieces, but never enough to matter. The students are young. They call me Miss Yu. They don't ask where I came from. I start each session by winding the watch Grandpa used to wear, just 1 turn, always, by hand. Not for the time, just the sound. I keep a wooden box on the highest shelf. Inside, sketches on graph paper smudged at the corners, some folded too many times. On the lid, a label I wrote myself, not for memory, for momentum. No one sees the box but me. Once a woman knocked at the cabin. Gloria Carmichael. She used to live next door when I was a child. She brought a small jar of jam and a folded paper towel. Your mother stopped by last week, she said, placing the jar on the rail. She asked if you still lived here. I didn't answer the door. I nodded once. I didn't lie, she added. I just didn't want her assuming you were someone she still had a key to. I didn't explain. I didn't ask what time she came. Gloria looked down at the step, then back at me. You're not angry, are you? I touched the door frame with the back of my knuckle. I'm not closing the door to shut anyone out, I said, almost without thinking. But I'm not opening it for anyone, either. She understood. I don't raise my voice these days. I don't stand taller than I need to. I exist without footnotes. There was a time when I thought being unseen was a loss. Now I understand it differently. I still keep the light on at the workbench, not because I expect visitors, but because some things deserve to shine even when no one's looking. And because silence doesn't mean absence. Sometimes it means arrival. I used to think letting go meant disappearance, but sometimes it just means choosing not to hold on anymore. I showed up at Mr. Alton's office without making an appointment. The receptionist didn't look surprised. She simply motioned toward the familiar conference room with the glass door and the walnut table that always smelled faintly of paper and polish. I placed the envelope in front of him, labeled in black ink. Cassidy Rowan Whitlow. Final Declaration. The letters were straight block style. No loops, no flourishes. He didn't ask what was inside. He just nodded once and slid it into a drawer without opening it. That was the last formality I owed the name I'd already outgrown. Inside the envelope were two things. First, a stamped court-certified document confirming the legal name change from Cassidy Rhodes to Cassidy Rowan Whitlow. No middle initial. No hyphen. I wanted it whole, not caught between past and present. Second, a handwritten letter addressed to the local probate office. I forfeit all remaining claims tied to the Rhodes estate. I do not wish to be contacted regarding any proceeding. I wrote it on unlined paper, the kind Grandpa used when sketching his first circuit diagrams. Paper that didn't tell you where to begin or end. I didn't send out an announcement. I didn't post a photo. I didn't text anyone to say it was done. At home, I opened the cedar box near the window, the one I used to keep for mementos. I took out the envelope from my mother, still sealed, and Logan's wedding invitation folded precisely into thirds. I burned them both in the metal tray I use for testing wires and scorched fuses. The edges curled inward. The glue along the envelope split with a soft hiss. The wedding invite took longer, like it resisted being erased. One line lingered in the flames before disintegrating. Don't forget who you are. I watched the paper fall into ash without moving. I didn't feel small. I didn't feel triumphant. I pulled the ledger from the top drawer of my desk, the one where I used to write down birthdays, gift ideas, and travel plans that never happened. I flipped to the last page. The ink had faded. The names looked distant, like they belonged to someone else's handwriting. I tore the page cleanly along the spine. No hesitation. No anger. No need for ceremony. I didn't burn that page. I just folded it once, placed it in the bottom drawer, and left it there. Not forgotten. Just no longer mine. I used to measure my worth by how often someone needed to be reminded I existed. Now, begin the morning with the same chipped kettle and a silence that doesn't ask to be broken. I don't replace what still works, even if it whistles wrong or tilts slightly when poured. The warmth finds its way through anyway. I wind the pocket watch by hand, always 3 turns, never more. The weight of it sits quietly beside my tea. Not for timekeeping, just to know something still ticks when no one is listening. I don't keep a schedule anymore. The workshop opens when I feel like moving. Sometimes I wear the apron with the burn mark on the hem. Sometimes I don't. The parts left unsorted from yesterday still wait in small trays, copper wires, old screws, a single washer that doesn't match anything. None of them complain. I received a postcard last week from a student I once taught how to solder a basic relay, Miss Whitlow. Thank you for showing me I wasn't broken, just unfinished. I pinned it on the wall next to the sketch Grandpa drew of a circuit that never made it to market. Above them both I wrote in black marker, built, not born. I no longer ask if anyone from before will visit. Gloria comes by sometimes with bread wrapped in cloth. She never knocks twice. I never ask where she hears the things she knows. I opened the bottom drawer today and took out Grandpa's handkerchief, creased at the corners, still faintly scented with the kind of soap no one sells anymore. I wrapped a backup watch in it, slid a note. Underneath for whoever stays next. No instructions, just the offering of something that's been tested. Once my mother told someone over coffee she needs to feel important, even if no one's watching. I remember thinking that was the closest she'd ever come to seeing me. But now I count things differently. Not by who remembers, but by what remains. The tea is warm, the clock still ticks, the light moves across the windowsill exactly the same way it did yesterday. I don't check the inbox. I don't wait for names that stopped sounding like home. I didn't win. I stayed. And that was enough, was